The locksmith didn't look at me when he said it. Mr. Holloway told me to change every lock on the property by 6 tonight. Said his stepmother doesn't have keys to Kestrel Row anymore. He said it the way you'd read a grocery list, like the 31 years I'd lived on this land didn't need a tone of voice at all. I stood in the gravel drive in my barn coat, holding a basket of Malbec clusters I'd just clipped for the morning tasting, and I said, then I suppose I'll need somewhere else to put these grapes. Calm. Almost pleasant. Because I already knew something Ethan Holloway didn't. If you're watching this on your lunch break, in a kitchen with coffee going cold, or tucked into bed after a long shift, welcome. Tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from tonight. I'm Margaret Holloway, 61 years old, and for 3 decades I called 140 acres outside Walla Walla, Washington home. I have one daughter, grown and gone to Seattle, and until that October afternoon, I believed I still had a family here too. I met Robert Holloway when I was 29, waiting tables at a diner off Highway 12. He came in every Thursday with grape-stained hands and a ledger full of debt, trying to save his father's failing vineyard. He had a 9-year-old son, Ethan, motherless since a car accident 2 years before, and eyes that looked older than they should have. I married Robert 18 months later. I taught Ethan to ride a bike in the row between the Syrah vines. Robert used to say the vineyard smelled different after I moved in, like something was finally growing right. That smell, sweet and green and a little like rain on hot soil, is the thing I still remember first. The blight hit in year 6 of our marriage. Phylloxera, root by root, vine by vine, through 60 of our best acres. Robert wanted to sell. I didn't. I had a small inheritance from my grandmother, quiet, unglamorous, sitting in a savings account nobody in that family ever asked about. I used it, all of it, $110,000, to replant, through a company I set up with our accountant, Dennis Fahey, called Kestrel Holdings LLC. Robert signed the paperwork at our kitchen table without reading past the signature line. You're not just my wife, he told me that night. You're the reason there's still a vineyard to leave anyone. I kept the folder from that night in a drawer for 15 years. I never once thought I'd need it. Robert died of a heart attack 9 years later, at 62, in the same rows he'd taught his son to prune. Ethan was 31 by then, married to a woman named Christine who ran the tasting room's Instagram account like it was a Fortune 500 marketing job. In the beginning after Robert passed, they were kind to me, or convincing enough. But by the second harvest without him, the small things started. First it was my bedroom. You've got so much space for just one person, Margaret, Christine said, moving me from the primary suite Robert and I had shared for 2 decades into the converted pool house, and honestly, the light's better out there for you. Then it was my name. The label had read Holloway Family Vineyards since 1987, my design, my hand lettering on the very first bottles. By the following spring, new labels arrived reading simply Kestrel Vineyards, EST Ethan Holloway. When I asked why, Ethan said, branding's cleaner without 3 generations crammed on a bottle, Margaret. Nothing personal. Then the harvest dinner. 40 years running, every September, the whole crew and family at one long table under the string lights. That year, I got a text at 4 p.m. the day of, keeping it intimate this year, just us and the investors. You understand. I did not understand. But I stayed quiet, because Robert had asked me once, near the end, to keep the family whole for Ethan's sake, and grief makes you keep promises longer than you should. Meanwhile, Ethan had started courting outside investors for an expansion, new tasting room, national distribution, the whole glossy plan. He needed capital he didn't have and a story that photographed well, young winemaker, 3rd generation, family legacy. He never once mentioned Kestrel Holdings LLC by name in any pitch deck. He didn't know he needed to. Dennis Fahey still filed our taxes every April, still had my signature on file for something Ethan had never bothered to read. The breaking point wasn't the bedroom or the label. It was my granddaughter's 9th birthday, the first week of October, the same week as harvest. Robert used to carry her on his shoulders through the Riesling rows singing off-key. This year, Christine planned the party at the tasting room, without telling me the date until it had already passed. I found out from a photo my daughter texted me. My granddaughter's cake spelled out KESTREL in frosted letters, no mention of the family name that had actually built the place. I sat alone in the pool house that night with Robert's old ledger on my lap, and instead of crying, I did something quiet and deliberate. I called Dennis Fahey and asked him to pull every Kestrel Holdings ownership document and mail me certified copies. I didn't tell him why. I just said, it's time I had my own paperwork in order. 3 weeks later, a national wine distributor called Larkspur Collective made Ethan an offer, $2 million for a controlling stake, contingent on a full ownership audit before closing. I wasn't in the room when the call came, but Christine told her sister on speakerphone in the tasting room, not realizing I was restocking corkscrews in the next aisle. $2 million, Ratch. We just have to get through the audit clean, and Margaret's non-issue. She's not even on the deed, she's on nothing. Ethan's voice came through next, lighter than I'd heard it in years. Once this closes, she doesn't need a room here at all. We'll set her up somewhere small. Done. The lock change came 4 days later, the same week as the Harvest Festival, the one event of the year when every investor, distributor, and local reporter walked those rows in person. Ethan met me at the gate himself, in front of the crew loading crush bins, and said the line I'll never forget, "This was never really yours, Margaret. You married into a name. That's all it ever was." A few of the harvest workers, people who'd known me 15 years, went quiet and looked at the ground. I didn't raise my voice. I said, "All right, Ethan," picked up my grape basket, and walked to my car. That night I sat in a rented room at the Marcus Whitman Hotel, 12 miles from a house I'd lived in longer than he'd been alive, and I laid Robert's old ledger on the bedspread and finally let myself read every page. 2 days later, Dennis Fahey called. "Margaret, I don't think you understand what you're actually holding." He walked me through it slowly, like he was worried I'd argue. Kestrel Holdings LLC, formed in 2001, majority member, 61%, Margaret and Halloway. The Vineyard's operating company, the one that actually held the harvest contracts, the label rights, the land use agreement, wasn't in Ethan's name at all. It never had been. Robert had transferred his father's original ownership into Kestrel Holdings during the replant, and never moved it back out. Ethan managed the vineyard. He didn't own it. And Larkspur's audit, the one meant to close their $2 million deal in 9 days, would expose exactly that. I wasn't surprised, not really. Some part of me had known since the day I signed that folder at our kitchen table 15 years ago that I was doing more than saving vines. The next week moved fast. Dennis pulled certified LLC records, tax filings, the original replant invoices with my grandmother's inheritance listed line by line. I drove to Seattle and sat with my daughter at her kitchen table while she read every page twice, then hugged me and said, "Mom, you're not small. You never were." Meanwhile, at the vineyard, Christine posted photos of a new deck addition, a leased BMW in the driveway, spending like the sale was already signed. Ethan called me once that week, voice honeyed in a way I hadn't heard since he was a teenager wanting the car keys. "Margaret, I know things have been tense. Let's talk before the festival, just family." I said, "I'll see you at the gala, Ethan," and hung up before he could say another word. Their countermove came 4 days before the Harvest Gala. A letter arrived from a lawyer I didn't recognize, claiming Margaret Halloway lacked the requisite mental competency at the time of the 2001 LLC formation and demanding a competency evaluation before any ownership claim could proceed. I sat with that letter a long time, more insulted than afraid. Dennis wasn't rattled. "It's a stall tactic, Margaret, and a bad one. We have your handwritten notes from those meetings, dated, witnessed by 2 people who are both still alive. We go to the gala. We go now." The Harvest Gala filled the new tasting room with string lights, a jazz trio, 40 investors in blazers, and 3 local reporters with notepads. I walked in wearing the green wool coat Robert had bought me our last Christmas together, Dennis Fahey a step behind me with a leather folder under his arm. Ethan's face went the color of unripe Cabernet. "Margaret, this is a private event." I didn't raise my voice. "It's my company's event, Ethan." I checked. I asked the room, politely, for 2 minutes, and a hush fell the way it does when people sense something real is about to happen. Dennis opened the folder and I read, slowly, from the actual shareholder agreement, Kestrel Holdings LLC, 61% held by Margaret and Halloway, formed to finance the 2001 vineyard replant following phylloxera loss. I looked up and said the line I'd been carrying since the day the locksmith wouldn't meet my eyes. You told me this was never really mine, Ethan. Turns out, most of it always was. A Larkspur representative near the back lowered his wine glass and said, quietly but not quietly enough, "Get legal on the phone tonight." Christine's hand found Ethan's arm and gripped it hard. One of the Harvest crew leads, a young man named Tomas who'd worked 6 seasons under me, stepped forward unprompted and told the room, "She's out there before sunrise every crush, same as always. Just so everyone here knows that." Ethan tried one last move, some line about the LLC being outdated paperwork nobody enforced, and Dennis simply held up the current tax filing, my signature fresh from that spring. The room had already decided. Ethan's desperation didn't land, because there was nothing left underneath it. The vote happened 11 days later, in a proper meeting with Larkspur's council present, a mediator, and Dennis representing my interest. As majority holder, I moved to remove Ethan as managing member for material misrepresentation to a prospective buyer. The mediator, a calm woman named Priya Anand, read the resolution aloud for the record. Motion carried, 6-1, Ethan Halloway removed effective immediately, Margaret Halloway named managing member of Kestrel Holdings LLC. Christine, notably, voted with me. She told the room afterward, quietly, that she'd found out about the competency letter only after it was filed, and hadn't wanted her name on it. It was the first honest thing I'd heard from her in 2 years, and I believed her. Ethan kept a minority stake, per the original operating agreement, but lost all management authority and the title he'd built his whole personality around. Larkspur closed their deal 3 weeks later, with me. It's April now, 6 months on. I moved back into the house, into the room with the good light, the one I actually chose this time. The vines are budding along Castro Row, and this spring the new labels went out reading Halloway Vineyards, EST 1987, Margaret's hand lettering scanned straight off an old bottle Robert kept in his desk. My granddaughter spent last weekend with me, flour on her hands, learning to make Robert's grandmother's bread the way I once learned it from him. Ethan and I aren't close, not the way people probably want this story to end. But he came by in March, alone, and stood in the kitchen a long time before he said, "I didn't know it was really yours." I should have asked instead of assumed. I told him he was welcome at Harvest, same as any minority partner, and that the door, this one, the real one, was never locked to begin with. If any part of this reminded you of your own quiet years, the ones where you kept a promise nobody else remembered making, I'd love to hear where you're watching from tonight, and what part stayed with you. If you want more stories like this one, stick around, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next row.